The 8th and 9th centuries marked a pivotal transition period in the early Middle Ages, witnessing one of the most remarkable political transformations in European history. During this era, the vast Frankish kingdom stretched across what we now recognize as modern France and the western regions of Germany, forming the heartland of what would become the Carolingian Empire. The political landscape was dominated by three major powers. The Frankish nobility held significant military and economic influence throughout the territory. The declining Merovingian dynasty, though still bearing the crown, had become increasingly ceremonial in their rule. The Catholic Church, meanwhile, was steadily growing in both spiritual and temporal authority, serving as a unifying force across the realm. The Merovingian kingdoms faced mounting instability during this period. The real power increasingly shifted to the mayors of the palace, or majordomos, who originally served as royal household administrators. These officials gradually assumed control over military affairs, taxation, and royal administration, while the Merovingian kings became mere figureheads, often referred to as the do-nothing kings. The physical setting of this transformation was predominantly rural, characterized by vast agricultural estates and scattered settlements. Monasteries dotted the landscape, serving not only as religious centers, but also as repositories of knowledge and centers of cultural preservation. The royal palaces, rather than being fixed in one location, moved frequently across the kingdom, reflecting the itinerant nature of early medieval governance. Technological and military developments played a crucial role in shaping this period. The increasing importance of heavy cavalry marked a significant military evolution, with mounted warriors becoming the backbone of Frankish military power. Armor technology progressed, though still primarily consisting of chain mail and helmets rather than the plate armor of later centuries. These developments in military technology and organization laid the groundwork for what would eventually become the feudal system. The emerging feudal structure began to take shape during this time, though it was still in its early stages. Local lords started building stronger relationships with their warriors through land grants and personal bonds of loyalty. This system would later mature into the classic feudal hierarchy, but during the Carolingian rise, it was still evolving from its more primitive forms. This period represents a crucial transition in European history, where the foundations of medieval society were being laid. The combination of declining Merovingian authority, rising power of the majordomos, and the increasing influence of the Church created the perfect conditions for the emergence of the Carolingian dynasty, which would go on to reshape the political and cultural landscape of medieval Europe. If you are passionate about the Middle Ages and want to embark on this historical journey with us, like the video and subscribe to the channel, The Medieval Archives, so you don't miss any fascinating content. Charles Martel, known as Charles the Hammer, stands as one of history's pivotal figures, shaping the fate of medieval Europe through his military genius and political reforms. Born around 688, Charles rose to power as the mayor of the palace, effectively ruling the Frankish kingdoms despite never claiming the royal title. His victory at the Battle of Tours in 732, where he halted the advance of Muslim forces into Western Europe, cemented his legacy as a defender of Christendom. Beyond his battlefield triumphs, Charles revolutionized the Frankish military by developing heavy cavalry and reforming the system by granting land to his warriors, a practice that laid the groundwork for feudalism. His leadership not only preserved the stability of the Frankish realms, but also laid the foundation for the rise of the Carolingian dynasty. Among those who followed in Charles Martel's footsteps was his son, Pepin the Short. Born in 714, Pepin became the first Carolingian to officially take the title of King of the Franks, deposing the last Merovingian king, Childeric III, in 751. With papal approval, Pepin's coronation marked a new era, solidifying the alliance between the Franks and Rome. As king, Pepin expanded Frankish territory, protected the papacy, and established the foundation for his son Charlemagne's monumental reign. Charlemagne, Pepin's son and Charles Martel's grandson, would go on to become the greatest ruler of the Carolingian dynasty. Born in 742, Charlemagne transformed the Frankish kingdom into a vast empire, uniting much of Western Europe under his rule. Crowned emperor by Pope Leo III in 800, Charlemagne initiated the Carolingian Renaissance, standardizing administration and education while creating systems such as counts and missi dominici to manage his empire. His reign brought a level of stability and cultural revival that defined medieval Europe. Standing in stark contrast to these transformative leaders were the Merovingian kings, marginalized figures who became known as the Rois Fainéants, or do-nothing kings. By the time of Charles Martel, these monarchs had lost their grip on power, reduced to ceremonial roles while the mayors of the palace governed in their stead. Childeric III, the last Merovingian king, was deposed in 751, marking the end of the Old Order and the rise of the Carolingian dynasty. A critical figure in this transition was Pope Zachary, who legitimized the Carolingian dynasty. Responding to the famous question of whether a king without real power should rule, Zachary provided crucial papal approval for Pepin's coronation. This act not only strengthened the alliance between the Franks and the papacy, but also set the precedent for papal involvement in royal succession, establishing the concept of the divine right to rule. Pope Zachary's actions facilitated a peaceful transition of power and reinforced the Carolingians' claim to legitimacy. The rise of the Carolingian dynasty was not without resistance. Conservative Frankish nobles opposed the centralization of power, clinging to the legitimacy of the Merovingians. Regional dukes sought independence, while external threats loomed large, including Muslim forces from Spain, Saxon tribes in the east, and Lombards in Italy. Internally, traditional aristocratic families, local power structures, and religious conservatives resisted the sweeping changes brought about by the Carolingians. Despite these challenges, Charles Martel, Pepin the Short, and Charlemagne redefined the political and cultural landscape of medieval Europe. Through their vision, military innovation, and strategic alliances, they forged a legacy that would endure for centuries, shaping the course of Western history and establishing the Carolingians as one of the most influential dynasties of the medieval era. This dynamic period showcased the complex interplay between political power, religious authority, and military might. The transformation from the Merovingian to Carolingian dynasty represented not just a change in ruling families, but a fundamental shift in how medieval European monarchy would function for centuries to come. The transformation of political power during the 7th and 8th centuries represents one of the most profound shifts in medieval European governance. This period saw the transition from ceremonial authority to practical leadership, fundamentally redefining how power was held and exercised. It marked the evolution from hereditary right to rule toward leadership rooted in demonstrated capability and achievement. New administrative systems emerged, integrating military and civil authority to create a more efficient and cohesive structure of governance. At the heart of this transformation was the rise of the mayors of the palace, who gradually eclipsed the traditional Merovingian kings. This central conflict unfolded across political, military, and economic dimensions. Politically, the mayors established parallel power structures, rendering the Merovingian kings increasingly irrelevant. By commanding loyalty from the nobility and taking control of key administrative functions, the mayors redefined the nature of leadership. Militarily, they gained dominance over resources, led armies into battle, and distributed the spoils of war, further solidifying their position. Economically, they managed the royal treasury, controlled taxation, and initiated land grant systems that laid the groundwork for feudalism. Political legitimacy became a critical sub-theme of this era. The traditional concept of divine right, which had sustained the Merovingians, was challenged by claims of merit-based leadership. Military success became a key factor in establishing legitimacy, with leaders like Charles Martel earning loyalty and support through their battlefield prowess. The mechanisms for transferring power also evolved, shifting from hereditary succession to systems influenced by noble support and religious sanction. The Catholic Church played a pivotal role in this transformation. Acting as a legitimizing force, the Church provided divine justification for political changes, most notably through the papal coronation of Pepin in 751. The alliance between the papacy and the Frankish rulers strengthened both entities, creating a new model of kingship rooted in both religious and secular authority. Monasteries emerged as centers of education, administration, and power, shaping the intellectual and political fabric of the period. Territorial expansion was another defining element of this era. Military campaigns and conquests under leaders like Charles Martel and Pepin expanded the Frankish realm, integrating new territories through cultural assimilation, religious conversion, and economic reform. Administrative systems adapted to govern these new regions, while border defenses ensured the stability of the growing kingdom. Two major turning points underscored the era's significance. The Battle of Tours in 732 was a critical moment, halting Muslim expansion into Western Europe and showcasing the military might of the Franks under Charles Martel. This victory not only enhanced Martel's prestige, but also reinforced the Frankish identity and the Christian character of the region. The second turning point came with the papal coronation of Pepin in 751. This event marked the end of the Merovingian dynasty and the rise of the Carolingians, creating a new power structure sanctioned by the Church. It set a precedent for divine approval in royal succession, strengthening the bond between the papacy and secular rulers. These themes and conflicts shaped the emergence of medieval European political structures, establishing models of governance that would influence the continent for centuries. They defined new relationships between secular and religious authority, forming the basis for the feudal system and setting precedents for power transitions that would resonate throughout the medieval period. The transformation of power during this era not only redefined leadership, but also laid the foundation for the political, cultural, and religious developments that would shape the course of Western history. The transformation of power during this period represented not just a change in ruling dynasties, but a fundamental restructuring of medieval European society, governance, and the relationship between secular and religious authority. This transformation would influence European political development well into the modern era. The Carolingian period witnessed a complex social hierarchy that would later evolve into the classic feudal system. At the apex of society stood the Frankish nobility, a powerful class of landowners and warriors who formed the backbone of the Carolingian military and administrative system. These nobles lived in fortified residences, though not yet the stone castles of later medieval times, and maintained their position through military service, land ownership, and close relationships with the royal court. The Frankish nobility's daily life centered around military training, administration of their lands, and participation in royal assemblies. They educated their sons in the arts of war and governance, while their daughters were typically trained in household management and religious devotion. The nobility's diet was rich and varied, including fresh meat, fish, and imported luxuries, setting them apart from the lower classes. The clergy formed a distinct and influential social class, serving as both spiritual leaders and custodians of knowledge. Monasteries and churches became centers of learning, where monks painstakingly copied manuscripts and preserved ancient knowledge. The daily routine of religious communities followed a strict schedule of prayer, study, and work, governed by rules such as the Benedictine rule. Higher clergy often came from noble families, creating important links between religious and secular power structures. At the foundation of society were the peasants, who constituted the vast majority of the population. Their daily life revolved around agricultural labor, following the rhythms of seasons and religious festivals. Peasant families lived in simple wooden houses, often clustering in small villages around a church or noble residence. Their diet consisted mainly of grain-based foods, vegetables, and occasional meat, supplemented by what they could forage from forests and commons. The emerging system of vassalage began transforming social relationships during this period. Warriors would pledge their loyalty to more powerful nobles or directly to the king, receiving land or protection in return. This created complex networks of obligation and service that bound society together. The ceremony of homage, where a vassal pledged loyalty to his lord, became an essential ritual in maintaining social order. War held paramount importance in Carolingian society, influencing everything from land distribution to social mobility. The development of heavy cavalry created a new military elite, as the expense of maintaining war horses and equipment limited this role to wealthy individuals. Success in warfare could lead to social advancement, with particularly valuable warriors receiving land grants and elevated status. From the perspective of nobles, this was a period of opportunity and responsibility. They saw themselves as the natural leaders of society, responsible for maintaining order and defending their territories. Their world was one of military obligations, political alliances, and careful balance between loyalty to the king and protection of their own interests. Warriors, whether of noble birth or rising through military service, viewed society through the lens of martial values. Their status depended on military prowess, loyalty to their lords, and ability to command respect from both peers and subordinates. The warrior class began developing its own distinct culture, which would later evolve into the chivalric ideals of the High Middle Ages. Peasants viewed society from a markedly different perspective. Their primary concerns were survival, meeting obligations to their lords, and maintaining their position within the village community. While they participated in the larger society through religious observances and economic activities, their world was primarily local, centered on family, village, and the seasonal rhythms of agricultural life. This social structure was dynamic rather than static, with opportunities for advancement through military service, religious vocation, or exceptional ability. The Carolingian period saw the emergence of a more complex and interconnected society, where personal relationships and mutual obligations created a web of social connections that would define medieval European civilization for centuries to come. If you're enjoying the history so far, tell us in the comments, which aspect of the Middle Ages has surprised you the most? Don't forget to like and subscribe to the Medieval Archives to follow our next explorations. The rise of the Carolingian dynasty was marked by three pivotal events that fundamentally changed the course of European history. Each of these moments represented not just military or political victories, but profound transformations in how power, legitimacy, and governance were understood in medieval Europe. The Battle of Tours in 732 stands as one of the most consequential military engagements in European history. Under the leadership of Charles Martel, the Frankish forces confronted and defeated a Muslim army led by Abdul Rahman al-Ghafiqi. This battle took place between Tours and Poitiers in central France, as Muslim forces had advanced northward from their strongholds in Spain. The Frankish army, though smaller, employed innovative tactical combinations of infantry and cavalry that proved decisive against the predominantly cavalry-based Muslim forces. The significance of Tours extended far beyond the battlefield. This victory effectively halted Islamic expansion into Western Europe and established the Franks as the premier military power in Western Europe. Charles Martel's success enhanced the prestige of the Carolingian family and demonstrated their capability to protect Christian civilization. The battle also highlighted the effectiveness of heavy cavalry in medieval warfare, influencing military development for centuries to come. The coronation of Pepin the Short as King of the Franks in 751 marked another watershed moment. This event represented the first legal transfer of royal power from one dynasty to another in Frankish history. The process began with a carefully orchestrated diplomatic exchange with Pope Zachary, who declared that the person who exercised real power should hold the title of king. This papal pronouncement provided the religious legitimacy needed to depose Childeric III, the last Merovingian king. Pepin's coronation ceremony introduced new elements that would become standard in medieval royal inaugurations. He was anointed with holy oil, a ritual that emphasized the sacred nature of kingship and strengthened the connection between religious and political authority. This ceremony established a new model of kingship that combined practical power with divine sanction, fundamentally altering how medieval monarchy would be understood. The establishment of the Holy Roman Empire in 800 through Charlemagne's imperial coronation represented the culmination of Carolingian ambition and achievement. On Christmas Day in Rome, Pope Leo III crowned Charlemagne as Emperor of the Romans, creating a new political entity that would persist, in various forms, until 1806. This coronation occurred in the context of complex political maneuvering involving the papacy, the Byzantine Empire, and Charlemagne's own expanding realm. The imperial coronation carried profound implications. It positioned Charlemagne as the successor to the Roman emperors and defender of Western Christianity. The ceremony created a new concept of universal Christian monarchy, distinct from both the Byzantine Empire and earlier Frankish kingship. This new imperial ideology combined Roman traditions, Christian theology, and Frankish military power into a unique political synthesis. The creation of the Holy Roman Empire also had practical consequences. It formalized the alliance between the papacy and the Franks, establishing a pattern of cooperation and competition between spiritual and temporal authorities that would characterize medieval politics. The empire provided a framework for political organization beyond traditional tribal and regional boundaries, promoting cultural and administrative uniformity across Western Europe. These three events collectively transformed Western Europe. The Battle of Tours secured Christian dominance and demonstrated Carolingian military capability. Pepin's coronation established new principles of royal legitimacy and succession. Charlemagne's imperial coronation created a new political framework that would influence European politics for a millennium. The legacy of these events extended far beyond their immediate context. They established patterns of political legitimacy, military organization, and church-state relations that would shape medieval Europe. The interaction between religious authority and political power the importance of military success in establishing legitimacy, and the concept of universal Christian monarchy all emerged from these pivotal moments in Carolingian history. Through these events, the Carolingians not only transformed their own position, but fundamentally altered the political, religious, and cultural landscape of medieval Europe. Their achievements created new institutions and ideas that would influence European civilization long after their dynasty had ended. The Carolingian Renaissance stands as one of the most significant cultural revivals in medieval European history. During the late 8th and early 9th centuries, under Charlemagne's leadership and continuing through his successors, the Frankish realm experienced an extraordinary flourishing of intellectual and cultural activity that would influence European civilization for centuries to come. This Renaissance began with Charlemagne's recognition that effective governance required educated administrators. He gathered learned men from across Europe to his court, including the renowned scholar Alcuin of York, who became the intellectual architect of the cultural revival. Together, they established a palace school that became the model for educational reform throughout the empire. The Carolingian Renaissance was characterized by a deliberate effort to preserve and revive classical learning. Scholars systematically copied ancient manuscripts, developing a new, more legible script known as Carolingian minuscule. This script became so successful that it later influenced the development of modern lowercase letters. The preservation effort extended beyond just copying. Scholars actively studied and commented on classical texts, creating a bridge between ancient wisdom and medieval Christian thought. Education during this period was primarily centered in monasteries and cathedral schools. The curriculum was organized around the 7 liberal arts: the trivium, grammar, rhetoric, and logic, and the quadrivium, arithmetic, geometry, astronomy, and music. This educational framework would become the foundation for medieval university education. Monasteries served as the primary centers of learning, where monks not only preserved ancient knowledge, but also created new works of literature, history, and religious commentary. The church played a pivotal role in this cultural revival. Charlemagne mandated that every monastery and cathedral maintain a school, not only for future clergy, but also for local noble children. This educational network helped standardize religious practices and administrative procedures across the empire. The church's involvement in education ensured that classical learning was preserved through a Christian lens, creating a distinctive medieval intellectual tradition that combined classical wisdom with Christian theology. Monastic scriptoria became the engines of knowledge preservation and transmission. These writing rooms were where monks meticulously copied manuscripts, created illuminated books, and composed new works. The production of books increased dramatically during this period, with monasteries developing distinctive styles of illustration and calligraphy. The books produced in these scriptoria were works of both intellectual and artistic significance, often featuring elaborate decorations and intricate illustrations. The intellectual achievements of the Carolingian Renaissance included significant developments in theology, philosophy, and historical writing. Scholars produced new commentaries on religious texts, developed more sophisticated methods of biblical interpretation, and wrote histories that combined classical models with Christian perspectives. The period saw the emergence of a more standardized Latin language, which facilitated communication and learning across the empire. Music also flourished during this period, with the development and standardization of Gregorian chant. Charlemagne promoted the adoption of Roman liturgical music throughout his realm, leading to innovations in musical notation and theory that would influence Western music for centuries. The emphasis on proper liturgical celebration led to advances in musical education and performance practice. Architecture and art experienced significant development under Carolingian patronage. New churches and monasteries were built following Roman models, establishing what would become known as the Romanesque style. The period saw innovations in building techniques and the revival of stone architecture, marking a significant advance from the primarily wooden structures of the earlier medieval period. The Carolingian Renaissance established intellectual standards and cultural practices that would influence European civilization long after the dynasty's decline. Its emphasis on education, manuscript preservation, and the integration of classical and Christian learning created a foundation for medieval intellectual life. The period's achievements in art, architecture, and music established patterns that would shape European cultural development through the Middle Ages and beyond. This cultural revival represented more than just a preservation of ancient knowledge. It was a creative synthesis that transformed classical learning into something distinctively medieval. The Carolingian Renaissance demonstrated how cultural renewal could serve political unity and religious reform, establishing a model that would inspire future Renaissance movements throughout European history. The rise of the Carolingian dynasty was marked by complex and far-reaching external relationships that fundamentally shaped medieval Europe. At the heart of these interactions was the crucial alliance with the papacy, extensive territorial expansion, and numerous confrontations with neighboring peoples that defined the boundaries and character of the Carolingian realm. The relationship between the Carolingians and the papacy proved transformative for both institutions. This alliance began in earnest when Pope Gregory III sought Charles Martel's aid against the Lombards. Though Charles declined to intervene, this overture established a pattern of papal-Frankish cooperation that would define European politics for centuries. The relationship deepened significantly under Pepin the Short, who answered Pope Stephen II's call for protection against Lombard aggression. This intervention resulted in the creation of the Papal States, establishing the temporal power of the papacy and cementing the Franco-Papal alliance. The creation of the donation of Pepin in 756 formalized the territorial grant to the papacy, establishing the Pope as a temporal ruler and the Franks as protectors of the Church. This arrangement created a unique dynamic where spiritual and temporal authority became increasingly intertwined. The relationship reached its apex with Charlemagne's imperial coronation in 800, an event that established the concept of a Western Christian empire and created a new model of Christian kingship that would influence European politics for centuries. Territorial expansion under the Carolingians was remarkable in both its scope and speed. The Frankish realm grew from a collection of territories in modern France and Western Germany to encompass most of Western Europe. This expansion was achieved through a combination of military conquest, diplomatic alliances, and strategic marriages. Charlemagne's campaigns alone added Saxony, Bavaria, parts of Spain, and northern Italy to Frankish control, creating an empire that stretched from the Atlantic Ocean to the Elbe River and from the North Sea to central Italy. The confrontation with Islamic forces represented one of the most significant external challenges. The Battle of Tours in 732, where Charles Martel halted Muslim expansion into Francia, stands as a pivotal moment in European history. Following this victory, the Carolingians maintained pressure on Islamic territories in Spain, establishing the Spanish March as a buffer zone. Charlemagne's campaign into Spain, though marked by the famous defeat at Roncesvalles Pass, helped secure the southern frontier of his realm. The Saxon Wars, lasting from 772 to 804, represented the longest and most challenging of Charlemagne's military campaigns. These conflicts were characterized by brutal fighting, forced conversions, and repeated Saxon rebellions. The final subjugation of the Saxons required not just military victory, but a comprehensive program of Christianization and cultural assimilation. Charlemagne established bishoprics, monasteries, and a new administrative structure in Saxon territory, effectively incorporating it into the Frankish realm. The conquest of the Lombard kingdom in 774 eliminated the last independent Germanic kingdom in Italy and secured Frankish dominance south of the Alps. This campaign, undertaken at papal request, demonstrated the effective combination of military power and religious legitimacy that characterized Carolingian expansion. The incorporation of the Lombard kingdom provided the Carolingians with direct access to Italy's resources and cultural heritage, contributing significantly to the Carolingian Renaissance. Relations with the Byzantine Empire remained complex and often tense. The Byzantines initially viewed the Franks as useful allies against common enemies, but grew increasingly concerned as Carolingian power expanded. Charlemagne's imperial coronation created particular diplomatic challenges, as the Byzantines considered themselves the sole legitimate heirs to the Roman Empire. This tension was partially resolved through diplomatic negotiations and eventually formal recognition of Charlemagne's imperial title by Constantinople. The Carolingians also faced challenges from various Slavic peoples along their eastern frontier. The creation of the Avar March and other border regions helped secure the empire's eastern boundaries. These frontier regions became important centers for cultural exchange and military organization, contributing to the development of medieval frontier society. The management of these external relationships required sophisticated diplomatic and administrative systems. The Carolingians developed an extensive network of counts, margraves, and missi dominici to administer their expanding territories and manage relations with neighboring peoples. They also established a system of tributary relationships with various peoples along their frontiers, creating buffer zones that helped secure their borders. The legacy of these external interactions proved long-lasting. The alliance between the Frankish monarchy and the papacy established patterns of church-state relations that would influence European politics throughout the medieval period. The territorial acquisitions and administrative systems developed to manage them created frameworks for political organization that survived the Carolingian dynasty itself. The cultural and religious changes brought about through conquest and assimilation helped shape the medieval Christian world and establish the foundations for what would become medieval European civilization. Through these external interactions, the Carolingians not only expanded their territorial control, but also created new models of political authority, religious cooperation, and cultural integration that would influence European development for centuries to come. The Carolingian dynasty left an indelible mark on European civilization, fundamentally transforming concepts of kingship, establishing enduring political structures, and shaping the medieval world. Their legacy continues to influence our understanding of European political and cultural development. The transformation of royal authority under the Carolingians represented a revolutionary change in how kingship was conceived and exercised. They created a new model of Christian monarchy that combined practical administrative power with sacred authority. This fusion of religious and secular authority established patterns that would define European monarchy for centuries. The concept of royal anointing, introduced during Pepin's coronation, became a fundamental aspect of medieval kingship, symbolizing the divine sanction of royal authority. The Carolingians revolutionized the practical exercise of royal power through systematic administrative innovations. They developed a sophisticated system of government that combined central authority with local administration. The introduction of missi dominici, royal agents who traveled throughout the realm to ensure proper governance, represented a novel approach to maintaining royal authority over vast territories. This system influenced medieval administrative practices long after the dynasty's decline. Their impact on medieval political structures was profound and far-reaching. The Carolingians established a framework for feudal relationships that would define medieval society. The practice of granting land in exchange for military service, formalized under Charles Martel, evolved into the classic feudal system. The organization of territory into counties and marches, each under appointed officials, created an administrative model that survived in various forms throughout the medieval period. The Carolingian contribution to European legal traditions was equally significant. They attempted to standardize law throughout their realm while respecting local customs. Their capitularies, or royal decrees, demonstrated a sophisticated approach to governance that combined traditional Germanic law with Roman legal concepts and Christian principles. This legal synthesis influenced the development of medieval law and governance. In terms of cultural legacy, the Carolingian Renaissance established educational and intellectual standards that would influence European learning for centuries. The emphasis on literacy, preservation of classical texts, and standardization of Latin created the foundation for medieval intellectual life. The development of Carolingian minuscule script had lasting impact on Western writing systems, forming the basis for modern lowercase letters. The Carolingian period also witnessed crucial developments in the relationship between secular and religious authority. The alliance between the Frankish monarchy and the papacy established patterns of church-state relations that would characterize medieval politics. The concept of a Christian empire, revived under Charlemagne, provided a model for political organization that influenced European political thought throughout the Middle Ages. The territorial organization of Europe still bears marks of Carolingian influence. The empire's division among Charlemagne's grandsons in the Treaty of Verdun, 843, created boundaries that roughly corresponded to future national divisions between France and Germany. The concept of a unified Western European political entity, though never fully realized in the Middle Ages, continued to influence European political thought. Military innovations during the Carolingian period had lasting effects on medieval warfare and social organization. The development of heavy cavalry and the system of military obligation tied to land ownership shaped both military tactics and social structures. The organization of frontier regions through marches influenced medieval approaches to border defense and cultural integration. Educational and religious reforms implemented during this period had enduring impact. The network of monasteries and cathedral schools established under Carolingian rule became the foundation for medieval education. The standardization of religious practices and texts promoted cultural unity across Western Europe, while the emphasis on proper religious observance influenced medieval spirituality. The Carolingian legacy in architecture and art established patterns that influenced medieval aesthetic development. Their revival of Roman building techniques and architectural styles laid the groundwork for Romanesque architecture. The integration of classical and Christian artistic elements created a distinctive medieval artistic tradition. Perhaps most significantly, the Carolingian period represented the first post-Roman attempt to create a unified European civilization combining Roman, Christian, and Germanic elements. Though the political unity proved temporary, the cultural synthesis achieved during this period provided a lasting foundation for medieval European civilization. Imagine that, a family that rose from palace administrators to kings and shaped European history. Which moment in the Carolingian journey surprised you the most? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe to the Medieval Archives for more fascinating historical content, and hit the notification bell to stay updated on our latest uploads. Join us next time as we continue to explore the amazing stories that shaped medieval Europe. The Carolingian legacy demonstrates how a single dynasty's innovations and achievements can influence civilization for centuries to come. Their synthesis of Roman, Christian, and Germanic elements created a new European civilization that would develop through the Middle Ages and beyond. By studying their legacy, we gain crucial insights into the foundations of medieval Europe and the enduring impact of political and cultural innovation.